Hey guys, this is Miss Abercrombie. In this next series of lessons, we are going to be talking about one of everybody's favorite topics, and that is test taking. Yes, I know, I can just feel how excited you are. No, but in all seriousness, this is actually a really important topic for a couple of different reasons. First and foremost, because as much as I would love to tell you that you are almost done taking these big, long, standardized tests, you're nowhere close. You've got at least a couple more years of EOGs left, and then you've got EOCs in high school, along with your high school exams, not to mention that there's a test you have to take to get your driver's license if you want that. Then there's the SAT to get into college. Then once you get into college, there's college exams, and then depending on which kind of profession you want to have, there's probably one or two more specialized tests to be able to get a degree or a license or a certification to do the job that you want to do. Tests are not going anywhere out of your life anytime soon. Sorry. The other reason that this is important is because we've been working all year at being good readers. But being a good reader and being a good test taker are two completely different things. I've known a lot of kids over the years who are great readers who don't always do that well on tests because they're not good test takers. And I've also met a lot of students who are not necessarily the best readers, but they get by with these kinds of tests because they're good at taking tests. They know the ins and outs. They know what to do to get a good grade on a test. And it's a completely different set of things you do than if you're reading for fun or reading to get information or reading to pass a class. It's a whole different type of reading, and there's a whole different type of skills you have to use to be able to do well. So that's going to be our goal over the next couple of lessons, is to start thinking about what you need to do as a test taker to do well on these big, long, standardized tests that are going to be such a big part of your life. Over the next couple of lessons, we're going to show you a couple of different strategies to see which ones are going to work best for you. Because here's the thing, at this point in your life, we could hand you a list of things and say you have to follow these different steps on this reading EOG. But y'all need to start taking accountability for this. You need to be thinking through, what are some things I've heard in the past, what are some things I'm hearing now that really feel like they're going to work well for me. At the end of these lessons, you're going to be asked to sort of come up with your own plan. When you sit down to take the EOG in a couple of weeks, or when you sit down to take any standardized test, what are you going to do? The only bad plan is no plan. You've got to figure out what skills and strategies really help you the most and which ones don't, and make your own plan for what you're going to do. Okay? So the first thing we're going to talk about, I also want to mention you should have a little booklet that says EOG Review. If you don't have that out in front of you, go ahead and get it out now. You're going to need it. One of the things we're going to ask you to do is take a couple of notes just to make sure that you're following along and everybody's good to go. So if you haven't already, go ahead and open it up and find day 1. It should be on the inside of the front cover. You are looking to fill in the blanks as we go, but mostly if you're just listening, you should be able to find them pretty easily. So really just think about listening and learning, not so much about taking notes. So the first thing we want to talk about is something that a lot of kids sometimes overlook. Anytime you're reading, your brain has to be on. And that goes for anything you're reading, whether you're reading a novel for fun or your science textbook, but especially when you're taking a reading test. If your brain isn't working while you're reading the passages, you have absolutely no chance of getting the right answers on those questions, because you won't have any idea what they're talking about if you haven't read and understood the text. Basically, if you're not thinking, you're not reading. You're wasting time and you're wasting energy, and you might as well not be doing it at all. Right? So that's the most important thing you've got to think about. We've all had times, even your teachers have had times, where we've read something and gotten to the bottom of the page and had no clue what we're reading. And normally, if you were just reading for fun or reading in class, you'd go back, you'd reread, you'd take the time and do it again. On a standardized test, though, it's all about time and energy. You don't always have the energy to go back and reread a whole 2-page section because you weren't paying attention to whether or not you were understanding it. So to help you with this, there's a couple of things you can do to make sure that your brain is staying engaged, and to make sure you don't get yourself in a situation where you feel frustrated because you just wasted 15 minutes not understanding what you were reading. One thing that can be really helpful to do is to take the text and to break it up into smaller sections. Most of the text that you're going to read on the EOG is at least 2 pages long. And if you wait until the end of that whole passage to decide whether or not you're understanding it, there's a really good chance that you're going to be lost and you're not going to understand it as well as you could. So physically take your pencil or take your, scratch paper that they give you and break it up into sections. Count off 2 or 3 paragraphs and draw a line across, or put a star over in the margin, or take your paper and cover up everything but those 2 or 3 paragraphs. Read just that and then stop and check yourself. Do I understand what I'm reading? Do I get it? If you understand what you're reading, then you should be able to sort of talk about it or write about it. You should be able to think through in your head, okay, here's what I just read. You should be able to write what we call a gist statement, and hopefully that's not a new term for you. If it is, we basically just mean 1, maybe 2 sentences if you need it, about what it was mostly about. Who or what was the main topic of that section, and what was the most important thing you were supposed to learn. If you can do that along the way and not wait until the end of a passage to do that, more than likely you're going to understand what you're reading. But just like every other human on the face of the earth, at some point you're going to read something and you're going to go, I don't get it. That doesn't make sense. But here's the thing. If you go, I don't get that, and you just keep going, you might as well just bubble in random answers and call it a day, because it's not going to get any better. If you don't understand what you're reading, you have to fix it. You got to do something. You've got to go back and make sure that you're understanding what you're reading, because that's the beginning right there. If you don't understand what you're reading, the rest of the test is pointless, because you're not going to have what you need. Thankfully, though, there are some ways to do it. There's some ways to fix your understanding that are really easy. First and foremost, the easiest way to do it, just go back and reread. 9 times out of 10, your brain just probably wasn't totally turned on, and when you read it a second time, it'll usually click for you. If that doesn't work, think about using some context clues. What do you already know? What knowledge is already in your head? What words do you know? What have you seen in other passages or in the beginning of that passage that can help you figure out what it is you're reading now? Another trick that can work really well is to physically mouth the words that you're not getting to yourself. So if there's like a sentence that's really confusing to you, literally open your mouth. Now, you can't just start talking to yourself in the middle of the EOG, you'll get kicked out. But, you can move your mouth without making any sound. Mouth that sentence to yourself. Sometimes just the act of doing that makes your brain work a little bit harder and makes it make more connections. And sometimes the act of mouthing that word to yourself or mouthing the sentence is enough to kind of make your brain work a little bit harder and make the connections you need to understand it. Okay? So this is a pretty simple concept. You've got to make sure you're understanding what you're reading. So today, you should have a copy of a passage in front of you called On This Day, Crazy George Henderson Leads First Crowd Wave. Your responsibility today is to try this out. Now, just like with all the other things that we're going to show you, you don't have to use these things for good, but you got to give it an honest try. You've got to at least try it once. Show us that you know how to do it, and then if you decide this doesn't work well for you, that's fine. You can choose some other things to do instead. Your job as you read today, you'll notice that every couple of paragraphs there is a star. Anytime you get to that star, stop, take a step back, and think, do I understand what I've read? If you do understand what you've read, you should be able to write a little bit about it. So stop and physically write down a sentence or two about what you just read. Now, in the future, if you feel more comfortable doing this in your head, you're welcome to. You don't have to take the time to write it down. But for today, just to sort of get yourself in the habit and to show us that you know what you're doing, actually physically write it down on your paper. You'll notice when you get to the end of the passage as well that there's a space for you to summarize. Again, if you are understanding what you're reading, you should be able to write maybe 2 or 3 sentences about what this entire text is about. Okay? You're also welcome, if you want to get out a sheet of notebook paper or use your little booklet to cover up the sections of text that you're not focused on. If that helps you to physically give yourself a smaller section of text to work with, that's great. You're welcome to try that out for yourself today too. But your main goal today while you're reading is to make sure you're understanding. Stop and check yourself. Do I understand it? Do I get what I'm reading? Can I talk and write about what I've just read? When you're done with the passage, then you should be pretty easily able to answer the questions, and then we'll go forward from there. Okay? So you're reading the passage, answering the questions, and you should be good to go. Good luck and have fun.